All right, I do believe we are now live. I'm seeing the lovely little button of all of our participants tracking in. So I want to say thank you so much to everyone who is joining us here this evening, both as viewers, as listeners, and as our amazing panelists. For this event tonight, we are talking about a lot of serious things, but hopefully things that will end up uplifting us and making us feel closer together rather than farther apart. So just to give you a little bit of background, on February 14th of 2018, Fred Guttenberg, one of our panelists, his daughter Jamie, at the time 14, was killed in the mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. At the time of her death, however, the Guttenberg family was already mourning. Just 4 months earlier, Fred's brother Michael had passed away of pancreatic cancer stemming back to his service during 9/11 as a deputy medical director for the New York City Fire Department. The loss of Jamie and Michael, who, if you read Fred's book, Find the Helpers, were incredible people who were devoted to public service, was, at the time, it seemed insurmountable. And he'll talk about that in a little bit. But in the days following Jamie's death, he was struck by a quote from Mr. Rogers, a show that he and his children, Jamie and Jesse, enjoyed, who said in a well-known interview in 1999 that his mother used to tell him, in the light of tragedy, that he should always look to the helpers to find hope. And day after day, people, many unknown to him, worked to treat his family with kindness and compassion. Today, we are here in part to talk about his book, amazing book, Find the Helpers, What 9/11 in Parkland Taught Me About Recovery, Purpose, and Hope, where he details his ongoing fight for gun violence prevention, but also the lessons he learned about living through grief and how to be a helper himself. And so to do that, we're joined, I think, by some amazing helpers. There is my beautiful and fantastic, brilliant co-host, Kelly Sampson, who is legal counsel and director of racial justice at Brady. We also have Clayton Rosenberg with us. He'll be joining in a second, who is having some slight tech issues. It's 2020, who is the director for Alliance of Concerned Men, a group of violence interrupters in DC. We have Kris Brown, the president of Brady, one of the oldest and boldest gun violence prevention nonprofits in the US, and Dr. Dana Winters of the Fred Rogers Center, who, if you don't know who Fred Rogers is, I think you might be very confused about this call, but you'll figure it out soon enough. We're going to talk about the way gun violence impacts Americans, how helpers can, lead people along their journeys, and how, when things seem dark outside, we can bring a little light to the world. So I want to thank all of our panelists so much for being here, and I want to give each one of you an opportunity to sort of talk about the groups you're associated with. So Kris, I'd love to start with you, and can you tell our audience a little bit about Brady?
Happy to, JJ. I'm thrilled to be part of this podcast with Fred and Dana and Clayton. And at this moment in time in our nation's history, I can't imagine really at the end a more important topic. I'm the president of Brady, obviously one of the nation's oldest and boldest gun violence prevention organizations, we'd like to say. And at the end, really what we're all about is ending the epidemic of gun violence. And we do have an epidemic of gun violence, even in the backdrop of this pandemic of COVID. What we've seen is an unprecedented spike in gun sales, 2 million more guns sold this year than last, mainly due to what the press calls panic purchases. And I think that's the right way to call it. Individuals who honestly never thought about buying a gun before ever, who are thinking about that because they're afraid. They're afraid that the police won't be there for them, or that if the police are, that's the wrong arm of government to potentially support them. And a big part of what we do as a gun violence prevention movement, very much related to Jim and Sarah Brady, is focusing on what we can do, the art of the reality of the situation that we're in. How can we pass laws? How can we make a difference? How can we enforce? And then when we can't do that, as a Virginian, I say this, then if you can't change the laws, then you change the lawmakers. We're at a moment in time where we have a huge potential for change, for real change around our issue. And I think people like Fred Guttenberg, who were not called to this per se, and never thought of themselves as activists. But unfortunately, the United States of America conscripts, and I say that purposefully, far too many people, people like Fred and his wife, Jennifer, to be part of this cause, because we lose people, and we lose people every day. And in far too many communities that are underrepresented across this country, in a horrible way. I hope that will change and that we can make real difference. So ultimately, we're here because I think that the uplifting and ultimate goal here is to make sure all of us are connected by what we can do together, regardless of party, regardless of circumstance. It's about empathy and understanding how other people live in this country and lifting each other up. And so I'm really excited to be part of this conversation.
Now I'm going to turn to Dr. Winters and ask if you could tell us a little bit about the Fred Rogers Center and Fred Rogers, or Mr. Rogers, as most of us know him himself.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be with you tonight. And yes, the Fred Rogers Center is that Mr. Rogers. It took me about 1.5 years of working at the center to start to feel comfortable to referring to Mr. Rogers as Fred. But the Fred Rogers Center was envisioned by Fred when he was ending his time in television. As early as the 1980s, he was beginning to think about what was going to come next for him. And he wanted to continue to write. He wanted to continue to serve children and their families and their helpers. And he decided to do that on a college campus. So he started the Fred Rogers Center. He didn't get to see us open. He passed away in 2003. We formally opened in 2006. But it was very much envisioned by him as a way to continue to extend his philosophy and his legacy well past his time in television. So Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was on public television for over 30 years, nearly 900 episodes. But at the Fred Rogers Center, while we do work around Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, we're far more interested in who Fred Rogers was outside of the sweater, who he was as a humanitarian, as someone who was so very much interested in the public good and advancing notions of empathy and compassion and kindness through all of his work. And that's the legacy that we've taken on now, is that the work that we do is in service of Fred's idea that we learn best and grow best through relationships. And what can we do to support and empower the adults around the lives of children to be able to continue to serve children and continue to help them to become caring, competent, and confident human beings.
Well, and I think we can't really talk about what it is to be neighborly or what it is to kind of go beyond ourselves without talking about Mr. Clayton Rosenberg and the phenomenal people that he works with at Alliance of Concerned Men. And so I'm wondering, Clayton, if you can tell our listeners a little bit about your organization and what all of you do in DC.
Yes, indeed. I want to thank you all for having me. My name is Clayton Rosenberg. I'm the Chief of Staff and Director of Operation at the Alliance of Concerned Men. We have been doing youth and gang intervention for the past 3 decades. Really going into the communities, creating relationships, brokering truths, just being on the ground in the community and someone that the community can depend on, that have hope. And we've been transforming lives. As we like to say, we go into the communities and we do surgery. You know, we always say that the violence is a public health, and it's a public health basically matter when it comes to dealing with this stuff on the forefront. But all we like to do is really build these relationships, broker truths, and make our community safe for everybody. And that's what we've been doing, just being on the ground.
Well, and I want to thank you so much. And so now maybe if we want to pivot to maybe the man of the hour, our other beloved Fred, if I can call Mr. Rogers Fred, because you're right, Dr. Winters, it does seem strange. Mr. Guttenberg, Fred, can you tell our viewers a little bit about you and about Jamie and Michael in particular, and sort of why we're here for a Mr. Rogers related event, why you named the book Find the Helpers.
Yeah, but before I do, because my book is about the helpers, and I try to deliver the message that helpers are everywhere. You only have to open yourself up to them. Clayton, thank you for what you do, because you are proof of this book. We all have our helpers. They are everywhere as long as we are willing to be open to that idea. And so thank you for doing what you do. Listen, my story was really horrific already before February 14, 2018. My brother, Michael, who was only a year younger than me, and growing up, we had all the same friends and we were very close. He was a hero. You know, he did things I could never do. I was the guy who would be running away from tragedy. My brother was the one running into it, which was the case on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. My brother ran in when others were running out. He was an emergency room physician, and he was there to set up a triage. He was part of the group of the original 10 doctors that were there. Nobody ever expected the buildings to fall, and he was inside when they did. And amazingly, where he hid out didn't collapse. He survived that, but he breathed everything in. And then he spent 16 days at ground zero, continuing to breathe everything in. And in 2013, got the cancer that came from that. And in October of 2017, he passed from the cancer. The thing about my family, I'm one of 5 kids. My parents are still alive. We never suffered loss. My brother was our first experience with it. So it was big. It was tragic. It was a very slow loss. And my family had never gone through anything like this. It felt like the worst thing in the world until 4 months later. I sent my 2 children to school. That's my daughter, Jamie, behind me. And we sent our children to school to learn with the expectation that they're going to be safe. I rushed my kids out the door that day because they were running late, never knowing it would be the last time. The last words I would say to my daughter would be, you got to go, you got to go, you got to get to school. Because you never expect it's going to happen to you, but it did. My daughter, Jamie, was killed February 14th, 2018 in Parkland, Florida. That day is a day that in weird ways, I remember some of the details so distinctly, it's like they're still happening. And so many of the details of that day are a blur. But as that day became February 15th and then February 16th, and as days started to go forward, I had to go forward. My family had to go forward. And while the world was spinning, we needed to get through the seconds, the minutes, and the days. And over the course of that early period and then moving forward, I don't get through it without the amazing help of others who carried me. They lifted me up. They did things I couldn't do. And that has continued. You know, listen, for anyone who has followed me, I have made it my life mission to do something about gun violence. And Kris, like you said, if those we put in place won't do something about it, then we change those who are in place, who will do something about it, because our lives are worth it. Your life is worth it. Everyone on this podcast, your life is worth this fight. My daughter had a favorite saying that she lived her life by, and it was dreams and dedication are a powerful combination. And with my helpers, I have a dream that we are going to do something about gun violence, and I've dedicated myself to doing something about it. And part of my dream is getting more Americans to just simply vote. I won't tell you who to vote for, just vote. Because the more of you who vote, the better chance we have of getting legislators who will do what we expect them to do. And so I really do thank you for having me on. for giving me a chance to tell the story over the course of the next hour about some of the amazing helpers in my life. You know, some of you on this podcast with me, I would call some of my amazing helpers, and I really appreciate you. But together, we're going to solve this problem. So thank you.
I just wanted to thank you. I mean, I've heard you tell your story, and every time I can't imagine that it's easy to do. So I just want to thank you for once again sharing your family with us, sharing Jamie and Michael with us, and helping all of us with your story, truly. And I know we talked earlier that the title of your book, Finding the Helpers, came from a Mr. Rogers quote. And so I wanted to turn to Dr. Winters because that quote of Mr. Rogers is pretty well known, but I was wondering if you could tell our listeners a little bit more about how that sentiment of finding the helpers aligns with Mr. Rogers or Fred's philosophy on life.
Sure.
Are you asking me or Dr. Winters?
Dr. Winters, but
okay.
Feel free to chime in. This is a conversation, so definitely not cutting anything off.
Sure. So the finding the helpers, looking for helpers is probably one of the more well-known quotes that we hear attributed to Fred Rogers. The quote actually goes back to Fred Rogers' mom. So it was when Fred was a young boy, he asked his mother when he was afraid, when he was scared, what he should do. And his mom told him to look for the helpers. You'll always find people helping. And I was incredibly impressed when I read Find the Helpers that, Fred, you found the complete quote, which is not often seen. So as an aside, I teach a course called What Would Fred Rogers Do at the college? And one of my assignments to my students is to find Fred Rogers quotes and dig deeper and find the whole thing. So you would have gotten an A on this, Fred, because the reason is it goes on. And Fred goes on to explain why his mom told him to look for the helpers. And the reason is because when you find people helping, you'll know there is hope. And that is so important when we think of helpers, is it's not just the act of helping, but it's the hope that we get from seeing the helping, but also from then becoming helpers ourselves.
You know, and it is the second part of that quote that drives me. So the story of how I actually came up with the name and the quote is actually more interesting than what you had told, JJ, because it wasn't the initial intention of the book. Initially, I really wrote a straight up manuscript. I was telling my story, and someone who I really trust implicitly, I shared with them what I had done. And this person said, keep writing, keep going. We want to know more about, like, everything you wrote involves another person. Like, we want to know more about those other people. And in the conversation, this person said, you know that Mr. Rogers quote about help? I was like, yeah. It was like an aha moment that went off. And that's when the search started for the complete quote. And candidly, after that, I went back and rewrote the whole book to really tell more of these stories about all of these amazing other peoples, because I didn't want my book to be about what happened to my family. It's part of my story. But I really wanted people to understand that in this process of going forward, there is hope. How I found hope, and how no matter what we go through in life, we can always have hope as long as we stay connected to our helpers. And so it is that second part of the full quote that really drove so much of what I was trying to do with this book, and the story that I continue to tell when I talk about the book. Because listen, think about this pandemic right now, what people are going through. This quote is one that this country should put up on billboards all around the country, so we all know, as long as we stay in touch with who our helpers are, going to be okay. But there's another side to that, which is if we're in a position where we can be a helper, we need to do so.
I think that that's brilliant. And I think someone should go and buy a billboard right now and place it somewhere. And I will say what also is brilliant is, and I didn't make this clear at the beginning, so my apologies, is that for all of you folks that are watching at home, please feel free, we do have a Q&A portion. So please feel free to start sending your questions in either through the chat function or in the questions below for our amazing panelists. And we will try to get to as many of them as we can. One of the things I think when we're talking about hope that I would really like to ask both to you, Kris, and to you, Clayton, because you both work in the fields of gun violence prevention, and you've been working in these fields for quite a while. If you have any stories about finding your own helpers in the face of gun violence. And one of the reasons why I think this is so interesting is, Kris, you're a lifelong Virginian and you fought for gun violence prevention in Virginia. Clayton, you're a lifelong DC resident. You've fought for gun violence prevention in DC. And I think it's so interesting that both of you have sort of remained close to home fighting for this. And so I'm wondering if you have any sort of tales of helpers or hope from, you know, your hometowns.
Well, I think Clayton will be more particular on these things. But so what I would say is it's a combination of things for me. First of all, I think that, you know, we had a conversation yesterday. JJ, you were a part of that. Kelly was too, with Gretchen Whitmer, focused on all that's going on at this moment and how we deal with this. And I think a big part of finding the helpers is finding people who understand where you are at this moment in time. And that's a big part of moving forward. For our movement, that's people who are committed to the cause, people who are empaths. And I think all of us in this movement are, and then also understanding we have a common purpose. We may have different organizations, we may have different ends, but ultimately we're all seeking to achieve the same exact end. And that's why having Clayton on and certainly Fred for me is so important, because we are stronger together. And for many issues in life, right? I was like Fred in the private sector for a long time. We all know how we're governed in the private sector. What's EBITDA? How are we performing? What's happening? And that didn't really help me that much as a person. And there's a reason that I'm back now leading Brady. Ultimately, for me, it's about how can I make the world a better place? That matters a lot, but what matters more are the other people who are a part of this. To me, in America today, it is just terrible that Fred is one of those people. I wish he wasn't. Jamie should be with him. And so should so many others. And Clayton can talk about this, but ultimately, it doesn't have to be this way. All that we can do as a movement is lift people like them up and ensure that their voices are heard, because it's not for anyone who's a thinking or feeling person, something that we can't commit to change together. And so for me, ultimately, that's what this is all about, is coming together, as Fred said, finding the helpers, and there's so many all over in your communities, and making a difference.
Yes, indeed. And I just want to just add to that. I mean, from our standpoint, every person that's willing to commit to change and help us in the community, we consider as a helper, as a good neighbor. It's plenty of times when we go into the community, and when we first started this work, DC was considered the murder capital of the USA. So we went inside DC and in the worst community. We picked the worst community out. What was at that time, DC had a murder rate around 484. With the intervention, with constant being involved in these individual lives, we were able to bring that down to 88. And that's because when we go in there, we look for individuals that's ready for change, but individuals that understand that we have to do this based upon the relationships. If we don't have a relationship in these communities, we cannot begin to talk to these individuals. We cannot begin to mediate certain conflicts that's occurring. We won't be able to get in front of certain things to prevent it from even occurring. So for us, it's always about building those relationships and having those neighbors who's gonna, let you be aware of what's happening, whether it's the moms that are always looking outside, the grandmothers that sit on the porch, whether it's the church, the congregation at the church, everyone that's considered trying to make a change, them are considered the good neighbors and the neighbors that really help us do our job better in order for us as violence interrupters, as credible messengers, to get on the front line and begin to, again, do surgery. We have to have that already established in order to begin to communicate with these individuals. So, having a good neighbor and being, someone that these people can have hope and believe in, that's how you begin to transform them. And we noticed when they research and they asked the individuals in the neighborhood we went in, why did you listen to them and nobody else? They answer was because nobody else came. Things like that, when you actually, give yourself and give yourself like unconditionally to make change in these communities and create that better relationship, you begin to see that, we all like each other. It's just they don't know how to transform. They just need the right resources. They need the right individuals to help them build that neighborly love. And, that own community, when we went in there, they end up cleaning the community up, the same ones that was once terrorizing the community. So you go to show that's how neighborly love, that's how that neighbor should be like. We should be helping one another build a better community for everyone. And, that's pretty much how we identify our neighbors in the community and the people that's helping us on the ground.
Clayton, in a post-COVID world, I want to come spend time with you. And I'm serious because, everything you just described is going into a community and helping everyone in the community to understand life has value. You have value. You're important. And when you think of Mr. Rogers, I'm not going to call him Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, and the show, every person, every character, everything on that show had value. Nobody was risen, put above one another. Everybody was treated with value. And that's what you're describing. And I got to come spend time with you when COVID allows me to do so.
Fred, we're happy to make sure that happens. And
Yes.
I want to be a part of that too. 100%. And that's why we love you so much, because that's ultimately what this is about. It is about community. It's about connecting with each other. And it's about finding a way to make a difference, one neighborhood at a time.
Sounds like there's going to be a post-COVID party at Clayton's. So I'm sorry, Mr. Rosenberg,
Probably.
you got assigned that.
With masks.
Well,
but
post-COVID,
yes.
Chris, we're going to be careful. And I think, what it makes me think of, Fred, when you mentioned that the sort of worth that everyone had in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, I think for Dr. Winters, I think of even things like Daniel Tiger, who like very famously sang a song that he was not a mistake, that no one is a mistake, that everyone has value and has purpose, and how just important that is. So, and I believe though, in terms of valuing people, I just was super rude and cut off Kelly. So Kelly.
Oh no, you're totally fine. I was just going to say, number one, I'm inviting myself to the post-COVID party. And two, I was struck, Clayton, when you were talking about like purposefully going into the worst, hardest hit neighborhood, how much that has in common with what Fred shared about his brother purposefully running towards danger. And so it's just really striking to hear that kind of commonality around people who go towards need. And so, Fred, I would love to hear from you if you could share some of your own experiences with helpers that, you put a lot into the book, but if you could just share some of your experiences with helpers too.
The first helper that I really focus on in my book was actually from the day of 9/11. A lady who to this day I wish I actually knew and met, but one of the great helpers and heroes of that day. So my brother is someone who, as I said, we know when there's something like that going on, he is the one running in. And we also knew his office was right near the World Trade Center. So we knew he was going to be in there soon. In fact, he got in there before the second building even got hit. When the morning hours rolled on and we hadn't heard from him, we all started to panic. As the morning hours rolled into the afternoon, we started to all settle into this notion of the worst case scenario. And my family was getting very emotional. We all believed we had lost my brother. Until late that afternoon, when this lady called my parents and said, I've spoken to your loved one. He is alive. He will call you when he can. And what's amazing is, remember what 9/11 was like. Remember the debris. Remember, the only people walking the streets that day were first responders. Yet this lady went out into all of that, went by where the first responders were, to every first responder that she could go up to, and said, you just give me a name and a phone number, I will call someone for you. And she did. That was the sign of life that we had for my brother that day. And I think about this lady every day, because she wouldn't leave her name, she wouldn't leave her phone number, but yet she did what she did. Following the murder of my daughter, I talk a lot about dear friends of mine who I already had, from one who's a law enforcement officer. And when we couldn't find Jamie, went back to the school and with the rest of the police that were there, walked the campus and found my daughter, and he identified her. Or from another lifelong friend of mine who was at my house the next day and didn't leave my side for, I think it was probably about a week. Everywhere I went, he was there. Drove me everywhere. When we were planning Jamie's funeral, he sat outside the room so we had our privacy, but close enough so that he could listen to everything that was going on so I wouldn't forget a detail. In ways big and small. But then, listen, I'm so fortunate to have you, my friends at Brady, as just examples of people who I've become connected with because of what happened. I can honestly tell you, I wish I never knew any of you, but I'm so thankful every day that I do. And there's so many others like that. And then if you look at in the political arena, one of the people who I love more than anyone these days is my Congressman Ted Deutsch, a guy who came to my house the day I buried Jamie. I didn't want any political people in my house. My sister sort of pushed it. So I met Ted Deutsch in our driveway abruptly and aggressively. And I was literally putting my finger in his face, telling him, you have 10 minutes. I said, and I can just promise you, when this is all over, I am going to do something about gun violence, and you're either with me or you're against me. And he said, oh, I'm with you. And from that day, and by the way, he didn't leave in 10 minutes. He and his wife, Jill, spent the rest of the night at my house. My family fell in love with them. They fell in love with my family. And we've been friends ever since. But I've had this amazing good fortune of becoming close to people in the world of politics, media, new friends from my community, people I never knew, but did such amazing things, not just for my family, but the other 16 families as well, organizing meal trains. Because honestly, you're not thinking about food when this is going on, but they made sure people were eating. I didn't know who these people were at the time. So there's these helpers come from so many different directions, and every single day, every day, I meet new helpers, but I have all my other helpers who I know are with me every minute of every day. And it's what helps me to go forward with hope. It's what inspires me to know that what happened to my daughter, we're going to start doing something about it so it doesn't keep happening to our kids and to those we love.
Well, even that, Fred, it makes me think of, and Clayton knows this, I stalk the Alliance of Concerned Men Instagram. I think I like everything in a way that is perhaps a little creepy. But you know, one of the things that I see that they're consistently doing, and other, you know, GVP group, you know, like local groups are doing consistently, is, you know, bringing food to the community, especially during COVID, bringing backpacks and school supplies for kids who are now at home. And I think sometimes we don't realize, maybe, or out people who aren't working in maybe gun violence prevention, who aren't working in maybe say child intervention, don't realize that these are things that saves lives too.
Yeah.
You know, food trains, just letting someone know that, you know, they deserve a hot meal, that's a big thing, actually. That's huge. And so,
You know,
oh.
listen, food, you think about what this country's going through right now with this pandemic, because it's not just the sickness. Think about how many people are going hungry right now, all the economic insecurity. They rely on helpers like that, you know, and whether it's the work you're doing in the community, or people like Chef Jose Andres, who sets up these mobile kitchens around the country, you know, helpers helping every day where they are needed.
Well, and on that note of sort of helpers and everything that's been going on this year, I think we can all agree that, you know, 2020 might have been better if we had Mr. Rogers in it to help us see it through. I know that I've found myself turning to old YouTube videos in times of trouble. And so for you, Dr. Winters, I'm wondering if you could share with our audience, you know, some of his messages or some of his trainings on how to maintain calm, to spread kindness, to be the best neighbors that we possibly can be in these times.
Sure. No pressure there in 18 minutes or so.
Oh yeah, I know. Small questions here, really. How can we be the best humans we possibly can be? Easy.
So, I mean, yes, easy. I think it really does very much play into what Clayton was saying about building relationships with people, the neighborly love. And I think oftentimes we confuse the kindness of helpers with just people being nice. And I want to push us beyond that, because that wasn't what Fred had in mind, I don't think, when he was talking about kindness, because the type of radical kindness that I've come to know from Fred Rogers and studying his work is, it moves far beyond just, you know, sheer niceties. I think it goes to the root of what it means to be kind. The root of the word kind is kin. It means brother, family, neighbor. It means approaching the other by, to use one of Fred Rogers' lines, seeing everyone as more than just one thing. So seeing beyond and being able to reach inside and want to show compassion and empathy and kindness to another person is not just being nice. Fred, the woman that you talked about, she saw beyond more than just one thing in every face that she saw on September 11th. Clayton, the work that you're doing, you're seeing beyond more than just one thing to truly come into contact with true kindness and compassion. And I think that in 2020, that's something that we need to think about even more, especially when we almost have to have a greater intention with the way that we interact with others. We're not seeing full faces all the time with our masks. We're not coming into just serendipitous contact with people as much as we were. That it takes that true intention and the core of what Fred Rogers advocated for in radical kindness to approach every single person from a place of helping means to see what those inner needs are and to be able to serve the inner needs which remain.
Dr. Winters, thank you so much for sort of distinguishing niceness with real kindness. So I want to bring in Kris and Clayton and see, what is something that you wish people knew about resiliency and kindness in the face of gun violence or gun violence prevention work?
Well, I'll start with this, but I really want to hear from Clayton. The idea that Dr. Winters talked about radical kindness, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because people who think about those words together might say, well, that's an oxymoron, to the extent that they would, like jumbo shrimp, radical kindness. And I love the way she put it. I wish we could clip her talking about this, and it's just a suggestion, but perhaps we can because she's the perfect person to put this forward. But that's the notion, right? This is radical kindness. I think in a weird way in today's world, and I can blame only the current occupant, and sorry if this now gets muted out for things that I'm violating, but let it be known. My view on this is this. Radical kindness is not an oxymoron. These two things go together. I love this concept, and Fred is laughing along with me, because that's what makes the world change. And honestly, to me, that is America. I know a lot of different people across this country have a notion of America, what they think America is. To me, America is uniting many different people together of all stripes, of all denominations, of all different life histories. We will come together and we will lift everyone up, and we will have a better society for it. That's my notion of America.
Yeah.
And I think that's not just this, oh, I have a dream. I actually think that's a reality. We have a lot of work to do. There's no question about it. But I can't believe that for my kids, you know, for all of our kids, that can't be the reality. That's what they want. We're all united. I'm sorry, but there's no way around it. Our environment, all of these things we experience together, we're connected. And I'm losing the thread of your question, JJ, so I'm so sorry. But
We love what you said.
Thank you, Fred. Perhaps you can bring me home, because I've lost the thread.
Listen, and then I'm going to throw it to Clayton, but I'm going to keep this real simple. When February 15, 2018, the day after happened, I went to a vigil and I spoke there that night. And I remember describing this feeling of being broken and saying, I don't know what I do next. And I'll just say this, and it is why I have hope for this country. Tune out all this negative rhetoric and noise. The reality is, all across this country, in every community, in every way, I was touched by radical kindness. Not just people being nice, but intentional. And I think that that word is maybe the difference between being nice and radical kindness. It's intentional. And I was touched by it every day. And honestly, it helped me to eventually not feel broken. And it helped me to figure out what I continue to do next. So, when we think about gun violence, just think about all the families that are fighting to do something about this, because they're so radically decent, they don't want it to happen to somebody else. Clayton? But there you go.
Yes, indeed. I think, really, it's just speaking on gun violence, we have noticed, just in our communities, we all have experienced a loss of someone in gun violence. And it's sad because, these are the people that's working in these communities on the ground, and all of them had an experience of a loss of someone being shot, right? And for us to even say that's normal, for us is a bad thing. That's something that we're experiencing on an everyday in these certain communities. And these are the individuals now been on the front line to help prevent that. So when we talk about, having a real robust plan and being able to pivot, because I think that's the best way I can say it. We have to be able to adjust to what's going on and meet them where they at, the individuals, because gun violence now, as we see with the pandemic, there's so many different variables and so many different things that's causing gun violence now. And even for us, when we go in the communities, we had a first responder program, and I arrive on scene before the police. So I get to see certain things that I don't want to witness, but I'm the first one there. So as a community member called me, hey, someone just been shot. Then I go to the scene and I see a body on the ground. I see things that, I'm not supposed to really be comfortable with. But because now it's ingrained that I have to help these people out, because I know if it was another version of me, they'd help me out. If they was in my position, this is what they would do. So I always put myself in that position to try to, now it's unconditionally, whatever they need, however I can help, I'm there, and the staff is there. Like, people understand that we're doing this because not that we have to, but because we want to, like, we want to do it because this is not normal. There's a lot of trauma in our communities, and the gun violence is at the top, where I feel like if these individuals had a second chance to not be experiencing certain things they experience in their community, we'll see something totally different. And when we go into the worst communities, we got an initiative now. We in like this was considered the sixth, the 23rd most dangerous place in Washington, in the United States, but the most dangerous place in DC. We were able to, with gun violence prevention, have that place now over 130, 40 days without a shooting. And now that place is considered a place where individuals want to go at now. Individuals, they come outside. You see people riding their bikes now. But just fast forward 6 months ago, pre-COVID, you won't see a soul outside because they knew that's how dangerous it was, where it was 2 to 3 shootings every other week. But it's like, this are the type of things that we have to, reinforce. We got to let the community know that it's going to start with them and it will end with them, because the community, they are the ones that's living it every single day. And some of them already have the answers. You just have to go there and get them to provide, what they already know, and back it with the resources, and you'll see the significant changes. But, I think me personally, I experienced, my family members, being shot, being killed. Like, I don't think that's supposed to be normal. I don't think that should be going on every single day. Like, it's not nothing. Oh, this person got shot, and you just like, oh, okay. Nah, this stuff is real. It's serious. I think it needs to be more real robust solutions behind it, because our people are hurting, and when hurt people. So they're dealing with that. If somebody is already hurt, somebody already is experiencing trauma, they're going to hurt other individuals because they think, why should I care about someone else when nobody cares for me? So we have to, show that love, show that hope, and reinforce that love and neighborly love in our communities, in order to get them to take their own community back, because we're going to build from within, and they're going to be the ones to be the real change agents when it's all said and done.
Well, and Clayton, I want to thank you for all of that, because I think also you set us up for a really great listener question that we've received that I actually want to open up to everybody on the panel. And this is from Roger, and I'm going to read it directly because I think this is actually really powerful. So Roger says, my son was also killed by gun violence in 2018 in Washington, D.C., just driving home from work. And my experience with helpers also saved my life. But unlike me, most families whose loved ones have been killed by gun violence in DC and are not well connected to civic leaders and politicians have been disenfranchised and overlooked by city agencies and council members and even our mayor for years, and even when their family members have been killed. So when people are traumatized and in grief, how do we get the helpers to find them, particularly when funding is way too low in every city and state? And I, in particular, Dr. Winters, I would love to hear to go beyond the sort of radical kindness idea, maybe what Mr. Rogers would even say, or about how do we go and seek out opportunities to better serve those that, we should be loving.
Well, I can't necessarily speak to the funding part, although I have thoughts that would transcend this this one talk here. But I think that we constantly come back when we think of difficult emotions and emotions that are very real for so many people, to the line that Fred used that was actually from his mentor, Dr. Margaret McFarland, that empowered Fred to seek out ways to help others through emotions that were very real. And that line is, whatever is human is mentionable, and whatever is mentionable is manageable, which means that we as helpers cannot be afraid of real emotion, of real feelings, that we have to be able to talk about these things. And not just as grown-ups, we have to be able to engage every level of people in this conversation in ways that are appropriate for them, but we can't ignore it. There will be no perfect way of handling this, but the only imperfect way is to not try. So we have to be attempting these conversations. We have to be reaching out in any way that we can to make all of those feelings very real, to be mentionable and manageable.
Yeah, and if I could, because I think it's an amazing question. And first, I'm truly sorry for what happened to your son. Um, you know, I didn't have any connections when my daughter was killed, and what I did do is I immediately went out and I stopped. I wouldn't stop talking, and I wouldn't shut up, and I reached out to organizations, like Brady and others, who helped me to get connected and set up on appointments with those who make decisions that led to what happened to our children. And it really, again, it gets back to this quote that you just said, whatever is human is mentionable and manageable. I started going to these offices of these legislators, and I refused to sit down. I made them stand up and look me in the eye when I spoke to them about what happened to my daughter. So I tell you this because what I would encourage you to do is, because of what happened to your son, if you want to do something about it, don't ever stop using your voice. Don't ever stop reaching out. Don't ever stop making people talk to you about what happened and the importance of doing something about it. Because, my friend, we are in this together, and together, we don't bring our children back, but we're going to do something to start saving lives across this country.
And thank you, Mr. Rogers. I know Mr. Rogers' moment. That's a good brother there. That's I want to say, this is it's so tough because we're still dealing with it as being in the community right now. We know that some of the politicians that are supposed to, you would think, common sense, they understand that more work needs to be done and the results don't lie. And there's individuals that's always unforgotten in our communities that need it. And if you don't bring those resources, they'll never go grab it. They'll never go reach for it because it's too much trauma. It's so much trauma to where if an individual do not, or you're not bringing it to them, they won't get it. And it's going to end up affecting that entire community. I know that just me personally, when I was, just responding to certain scenes, and if I did not say, hey, we have these resources that we can give you, or we have these wraparound services that might be, the best for you and your family in order to take you out of this situation, to get you in a safer, better situation, they will still be in that same predicament where they just lost someone. And now they got to worry about something else is going to happen to their other child, or if something else is now going to happen to someone else in the community by being an innocent bystander. It's like, and I guess I would concur with Fred. I think you have to really push forward and never let individuals forget. You have to, push it down their throat, as they say. You have to really be on the front and let them know that this isn't normal. We're not going to allow it to be normal. We're not going to allow it to just go away because there's individuals that's hurting and voices are never heard. So we have to change the topic. We have to change the focus, and we have to reinforce that everybody that's experiencing things like this matters. Everybody we all matter, and we have to make sure we reinforce that and push up these individuals, because if they were able to speak and get in that platform, they'll tell you things that these, some of our politicians won't even believe. But these are their everyday lives, and they still got to go to work. They still got to go to school. They still got to make sure they provide for their children. They still got to make sure they look, just being safe outside, just in their own community. So I think we really have to reinforce it and push that, and never let them forget, and never let them, hold them accountable. Everybody got to be held accountable. And even them, they understand, but accountability got us go on all four fronts. So that's what I think, we should definitely, continue to spread your word, Mr. Marmon. And, I'll be right there with you, on the front line, pushing and making sure we hold these politicians accountable.
JJ, I think you started a bit of that question also by talking about what would Fred Rogers say, what would Fred Rogers do, and what Clayton is saying, what Fred is saying. The question isn't what would Fred do, what would Fred Rogers do anymore. It's how can we continue? How can we do our little parts and make our ripples to do that? And Clayton, by saying you don't stop, you keep going, you keep standing up for what you believe in, to get the resources that we need. We all have to do our part. That it's not enough to say, well, what is this next person going to do? What are you going to do? And that's something that, when we talk about empowering each and every one of us to find our voice, that's what, those little C changes become the big C changes. And that's the work that, Clayton, you're doing every single day. I didn't get invited to your party. I'd like to come too, if that's okay.
I thought it was implicit that you were implied that you were coming.
I didn't want to surprise him when I showed up. So I'm coming too.
Invite her, guys. Let's make it happen.
But it's organizations and it's talks like this that keep that moving in every part of the conversation as possible.
Well, and I think that sets, again, all of you are setting me up so well for these questions. You're making my job incredibly easy. And as we're, coming close to an end on our time together, which is why, of course, we need to have continuous parties afterwards that maybe people can or cannot, our audience can may or not attend. I want to pivot to one of our listener questions here, which really, I think, gets to the heart of some of the anxieties that are going on right now, which is what would you maybe say, all of you individually, to those who are fighting for a change, maybe those who are fighting for maybe gun violence prevention legislation, but are discouraged by what they see in the world? And maybe another example of this is, we're only a few days from an election. More and more people are trying to get out and vote, but a lot of people are worried about violence at the polls and about fighting at the polls, particularly people coming with guns. And so do you have any advice for our listeners on how to deal with that anxiety, and then how to keep fighting and how to keep being radically kind and in the face of a world that can sometimes seem very, very cruel?
Listen, I would say first, so much of the fear is manufactured to keep you from going to the polls. And so don't fear your obligation and your right to vote. But get out and vote as soon as possible. There's no need to wait. Vote. The earlier you vote, the earlier you get your voice counted, the better for democracy. Americans, I think, are showing up in record numbers for this election because they do believe in this country, because they do believe in radical kindness, because it's what we want. We're not going to give in to the fear that was designed to keep people from voting. People are showing up. And so for anyone who still has a concern about what could potentially happen on election day, my advice to that person is don't wait till election day. Go out and vote tomorrow.
I think you're trying to
hang around this, and then I just have to say, for our cause and for this election, so many people who we sit on the shoulders of incredible leaders in this movement have done incredible things, but what they would say about this moment in time, if John Lewis could somehow morph into the reality of today and talk to us, he would say, I'm sure there is no more important election. And look back on his history. Just look it up. Understand what he did, what he stood for, what he spent his life doing. And at the end, despite, incredible accomplishments, I was so thrilled to stand with him on so many, podiums. But ultimately, what he stood for is the right to vote. It's just that simple. It's so basic. And he spent a career in public service, a career before that, as someone who was pivotal in our civil rights movements, being beaten down at clubs, being put behind bars. And he stood for that for a basic premise, the right to vote. Let's not let all of that history and all of that activism for people who are undoubtedly heroes to you, me, all of us on this podcast, but also everyone listening. These are heroes. Don't let it go to waste. Just vote. I mean, it really is that simple. And if you have a voice, and you do, don't discount it. Encourage everyone else to vote. Just make it happen. Tell them to vote. Make it happen, because you will be living their legacy. That's what they did. Be like them. And I think that this podcast and all that we're saying will really show it takes all of us. It's the simple acts. Don't discount your own power. You have power. You have influence. Make it happen. And we can make a change all of us want to see. It's not a minority. It's all of us want to make it happen, but it does take all of us.
Clayton and Dr. Winters, how about you? I want to make sure I open it up to you two as well, because I think it's such an important question.
So I think, I referenced the ripples that we can all make earlier. I think to be an agent for change, there are times to be loud about it, and there are times to do it softly. And voting is one of the ways that you can just do it softly, and that you can use your power in ways that, that is hopefully an easy way to have your voice heard. And when I look at when everybody is doing their part in those ripples, we have a chance to flood the entire system. And that's the goal, is that we all play a role in that. We all do have a voice, and anything we can do to make sure that it's heard in big and small ways is worth the effort.
I think you're still muted, Clayton. I'm sorry.
Hello, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, now you're good.
I'm sorry.
Hey, we made it through a whole call with only one Zoom problem. This is amazing. This is a miracle in and of itself.
Yes, indeed. Okay, yeah, my computer. But okay, so basically from I guess, and I got little fruit flies. I have some fruit out, and they just flying around me. It's like making me like slap everything. But matter of fact, can you actually repeat the question?
Yeah, so it was just sort of, how do we deal with, I think the bigger question here is that how do we deal with, I think, sort of this anxiety about maybe living in a world that seems like it's increasingly violent. I mean, I know that you all, particularly Alliance Against Men, have had a lot of experience at, making communities less violent, but I think a lot of people feel like they're living in a world that's increasingly noisy. And so how do maybe we deal with that and still find helpers in that system?
Yes. So just from I guess that perspective from us, it's I want to say that they're really dealing with it on the ground level. It shows you things that you can't even imagine. Just going in certain communities where you know that this community can instantly go from 0 to 100 in a split second based upon things that sometimes are out of your control. So you have to go in there unconditionally. You have to understand that the individuals that you're dealing with, sometimes they are hurt, and they're not going to want to, just communicate with you right off the bat. They're not going to want to, hear what you got to say. And you're going to think that's your time to just say, you know what, I'm not going to help them no more. I'm not going to do it. But you can't, because they just looking for somebody to trust first, because they so used to inconsistent people coming into their lives for a quick second. And then next thing you know, they're out of their lives, and then more things are escalating and more things are happening. So you really have to be willing to sacrifice and be selfless in this work you have to be selfless. There was plenty of times, and just going back to the beginning, where I was mentored in the organization. So for me, they had a program where they went inside the prisons and mentor some of the inmates in the prison, and told them just because they are incarcerated, their duties as a father doesn't relinquish. So because of that, them individuals from the prison that they mentored end up coming out of jail and begin to be mentors themselves, to try to help shape your path to not go where they were just at. And from that standpoint, one of the individuals mentored me. So I was involved in the organization when I was like 10 years old. And having that ability to now say, you know what, I know these individuals helping me write my path the right way, but what can I do more to give back when it's all said and done? When I was able to, they helped put me through my grad school, helped me get my master's because of just the donation from them. So I said, I have to give back. So I came back in 2017, where we didn't have no funding, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna still sacrifice because you sacrificed for me. And there was no funding for like 2 years, and we were just depending on donations. And I said, I'm still going to make it my job to make sure that I'm able to give back to the community. So I'm in the community a lot of times, and they thinking everything good because we're still going in there with a smile. We're still going in there like we're not experiencing our own hardships in our household. But we have to understand that the people that's dealing with the stuff on the forefront, them people like in the community, they're experiencing so much more. So I put whatever issues that I was having, whatever issues the organization was having, I put it in the back because these people needed us more. They needed hope. They needed people to really help them navigate through life, or they was going to result to making the community unsafe for everybody. So we had that unconditional love. We had that ability to recognize that building these relationships in these communities will help us be better violence interrupters, will help us be better individuals, will help us be now a part of that community. So each community that we in now, we all a part of it. So when they hurt, we hurt. When there's a shooting, that affects us. So we have to make sure that we're able to give them more and provide that love. And that's what we do now on more than ever. We give them things that they're not used to. So when you give them that real love, it's almost a surprise to them because they never felt love before. They never felt that type of hope before. They never saw someone consistently care for them, calling them, making sure they up, making sure we can give them the basic needs like an ID, making sure that we provide them with information on resources, on jobs, making sure that, you need help with family care, things like that, where they never had that hands-on experience from somebody that they trust, that they know we be a part of the community. So we're going to be there. Regardless if the funding stopped tomorrow, we still going to be there. And that's what they understand. And that's why they trust us more to really begin that transformation.
I didn't want to cut you off, Fred, if you were going to chime in.
No, I'm
Okay.
just listening.
Gotcha. And I mean, I think it's interesting because I know you don't do this for accolades, Clayton or Fred, but hearing you talk, I mean, I think I can speak for everyone on the call that you're heroes. I mean, these are the things that you're talking about are heroic, to share your family story in the way that you do, Fred, and push forward, or to go into communities, Clayton. I mean, that I hear you all talking, and I just have to say it out loud because it's true. I think it's truly, truly heroic. And that's why we have to have parties, as JJ said. And I wish we had more time, but to kind of round it out, I would love if each of you, everyone on the panel, could talk about where people can find more information about your organizations, and also any actions that people can take to be helpers in their own neighborhoods.
Yeah, I'll start. And there's a variety of ways. We're on all the different platforms, whether it be Twitter. Personally, I'm as Fred_Guttenberg, but Orange Ribbons for Jamie also has a Twitter page. On Facebook, I have a public page, Fred Guttenberg author, but Orange Ribbons for Jamie also has a page. Same thing on Instagram. And then we also have a website, orangeribbonsforjamie.org. And by the way, Jamie is spelled Jaime. We did it a little different. So there's a variety of ways to find us. I have a personal webpage also, just fredguttenberg.com. And we're going to keep at this, keep working to do something about gun violence, but also keep working to spread this whole concept of radical kindness and helpers, and doing whatever I can with my book and sharing my story to hopefully give people hope.
I can go next. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to take the lead here. And so Dr. Winters, where can we find out more about the Fred Rogers Center?
Sure. So our website is fredrogerscenter.org. You'll be directed to some of the initiatives that we have in serving children's helpers, educators, and beyond. And I think if I were to give one piece of advice on how to be a helper, be there. Be there for another person in a real way. See their humanity, see who they are, learn them. Fred Rogers always talked about, if you have anything ever to do in the life of a child, you do it. You learn, you listen, you hear from them. And at the center, we want to extend that beyond children to all human beings. That if you have any opportunity to be a helper for another person, that you do that, you learn that person, you listen to that person, you hear that person, you're there for that person. And you see the humanity deep within them.
And I'll just add to that, JJ, for me, just listening to the amazing contributors to tonight's podcast, we are all together united for, I think, a common purpose, which is advancing humanity. At the end, I think, for our cause, like so many others, we're united trying to make the world a better place. So the only thing that I would say to kind of end with this that I think is really important, and it's from Fred's book, so I'll just say, please note this and think about it, is he starts this off this way. And I think it's important to think about, because it's not something not all of us do, but we all will at some point, which is grief is love with no place to go. And if you haven't suffered a loss, well, that may be a strange idea. But if you have, you know what it means. And for too many people in America today, gun violence is that kind of loss. And it doesn't need to happen. And it doesn't need to be political, right? You don't need to send your kid to school and then have to deal with the consequences of that. So I just would close with that thought of, can we find a way to come together in a more united sense of what we will do together to make sure that fewer of us have to think about grief and what we do as next steps to resolve the idea of a loss of someone who was our child or our brother or sister or friend. that's a uniquely American problem, and we can solve it.
And Clayton, where can we find Alliance of Concerned Men so people can join me in my stalking so I'm not so alone?
Our website, allianceofconcernedmen.org. The Instagram, we have two. It's ACM underscore Cure the Streets, or the Alliance of Concerned Men on Instagram, and then Twitter, ACM underscore DC. And I guess just to answer that question, I say we can have a call to action, basically. Just telling each person in your community different ways and how to get involved. Everybody, as I say, is not built for the same thing. Everybody can't be a violence interrupter, and that's fine. But there's always a way that each individual can assist. Each individual have their own skill set, their own talents in which they can help provide and gather resources, or help just be, as you say, a good helper. Just be a good helper. And we all have them ways. So I think if we focus on what's our own talents, and then we, reinforce that, then trying to do something, just do something. That's it. We just have to do something sometimes. So that's what I'll just, close it with that. Just sometimes if you don't know what to do, just do something.
Well, it's actually really good advice. So on that note, I will tell everyone, as always, if you go to bradyunited.org or bradyunited.org/podcast, you'll see a link to this, and I'll have links to then all of our amazing panelists where you can find their organizations, where you can find resources related to all the stuff we talked about today. Kelly and I often joke that one day we want to have a podcast guest conference because we want to be best friends with everybody who comes on the podcast.
That is a running conversation.
Yeah, so it's ongoing. And I think the fact that we went far over the time allotted for this panel is representative of that. So I want to just thank you all from the bottom of my heart so much for coming on. And in the spirit of Mr. Rogers himself, who's from Latrobe, home of the banana split, where it was created, let's all go out, have some ice cream, and then let's go vote. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Close, JJ. Good night.